Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah Sandroman, a member of the Junior League of Mexico City and an at-large director on the AJLI board. I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon. Noor Tagouri is described as a tough-as-nails activist with a passion for demanding change and asking the right questions. Perhaps 118 years ago, someone might have said the same thing about Mary Harriman, which is why Noor is such an inspiring, spot-on choice for our 2019 keynote. Noor started asking the right questions in 2017 when she released her first series on Hulu called A Woman's Job. This series profiled women who had redefined what it meant to build careers in traditionally male-dominated professions. Last year, she released the documentary series Sold in America. Noor displayed her passion and tenacious style of investigation in this deeply personal series that covered the sex trade in the U.S. Her audience was swept away by the candid stories and the in-depth reporting, leading Sold in America to spin off into its own podcast, which climbed all the way to number 8 on Apple's podcast charts. For her second podcast, she partnered with Toomey and Girlboss to create In Progress, an imperfect journey navigated, which was based on her global speaking tours. Equipping people with the truth, passing the mic, challenging all perceptions, even my own, allowed for us to push for change, said Noor earlier this year. Honest in her journalism, candid in her podcasts, human in her fashion line, fierce in her activism, empowered as a speaker, and unapologetically authentic, I give you Noor Tagouri.
Because I decided to wear heels like a proper woman. And it got stuck in my pants. Isn't that what heels are for? I was saying earlier, I really believe that heels were meant to keep women slower. Yesterday I was at the UN speaking, and actually I wasn't speaking, I was learning, and in my head wanting to speak because there's a lot I wanted to say. And the heels, they reminded me that we have a long way to go in comfort and in feeling taller. So that's my little rant on heels. I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Deb. Thank you to everyone at the Junior League. I am not just happy to be here, I'm really thrilled to be here because I had to go through TSA this morning, and that's always a kind of circus for me. You never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's like a full-down body massage in the middle of the airport in front of everybody. And sometimes they kind of let you go with a breeze because I walk really confidently through security with Clear and with TSA Pre, and I make people confused as to why the alarms didn't go off. But anyway, I'm ranting even more. So this isn't a bad hair day. I'm actually Muslim. I don't know if you've heard anything about us on the news. It's really great. People love us. They love talking so dearly about us. They love talking about how wonderful and powerful our women are, how vocal we are, how empowered and not oppressed we are. It's really great. No, I'm kidding, actually. The media tends to stereotype Muslims all the time. And judging by the questions I get, people don't really know a lot about us. For instance, people will say things to me like, you just speak really good English. And I'm like, listen, I was born in West Virginia, but, I get why you're saying that, but it's still pretty offensive because we all speak great English. Sometimes people ask me if I had an arranged marriage, and I like to remind people that my husband's Catholic grandmother would have never arranged for me. Ever. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, we don't really know who we are unless we've heard our own stories firsthand. And we can assume things about people, we can believe what we hear in the media, or we can form our own opinions by experiences and spending time with people and listening to their own stories. And usually you'll find that you have a lot more in common with people than you think. For instance, I went to college, I had a punk phase. I used to listen to Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco every day, and I don't know if you guys listen to, okay, woo! Yay! I also listen to, every photo shoot that I ever have, they'll ask you, like, so what do you want to listen to? Because usually when you listen to music, it, like, gets you in the mood and stuff. And I listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers, like, without a doubt, every single, yeah? We can just have a dance party. Great. So, yeah, I had a punk phase. I used to get in trouble at the dinner table for belching or talking to boys that I shouldn't have been talking to or coming home late. And, yeah, I'm a journalist and a Muslim woman and I'm an activist, but this is also a tangent. This is just going to be a speech of tangents. So I used to really hate when people would call me activist because I knew that it was only because I was a reporter who happened to wear the hijab, and therefore it's so radical that I must be an activist. But I was like, no, I'm just telling stories, even though it's not what you would typically think. And then I realized that my way of storytelling was so radical because I made sure that I came into every story without a script in mind and made sure that I was passing the mic to the people whose actual experiences were the ones that were elevated and not my story of their experience told through my lens. And so therefore, I now claim that title, but in my own way. So yeah, I'm all of those things, but most importantly to most people, I'm a storyteller and a story collector, and I absolutely love listening to stories. But the thing about getting all of those titles and getting to the place that I am today is that if I'm walking across the street or I'm sitting on an airplane, a lot of people don't realize that. And the reality is it's because most of us get a lot of exercise jumping to conclusions. And I'm speaking about this from like my perspective and experience of being a total and judgmental jerk. So I'm going to share a little story. This isn't a tangent. This is actually a part of the talk. So I got booked in 2016. So for some reason in 2016, I ended up getting booked for a lot of speaking engagements all across Middle America. And it was just, 2016. Oh my gosh, what happened in 2016? So I got booked for a lot of speaking engagements, and it was very curious because I was like, what am I doing all over the place by myself? So I get booked for a talk in South Dakota. And when I land in South Dakota, I'm like staring out the window. The student who booked me picked me up, and I'm looking at like all of these cows, and I'm just wondering like to myself, I know for a fact that there are no Khadijas or Muhammads anywhere for like miles and miles. What am I doing here? So I look at her and I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? Why did you book me? And her name is Caitlin, and Caitlin looks at me and says, well, here's the thing. We kind of have a white supremacy problem on campus, and we thought you could fix it. And like, I don't want to curse here, but like, I was like, what? Like, that's 5'4" little hijabi girl is going to come into the middle of South Dakota to fix a white supremacy problem. Cool, great. So I get into the green room, and I like have this pit in my stomach. I'm really nervous, and she told me that it would be 200 people, so I thought, it's 200 people, like I can handle this, I'm okay. But I call my mom and my husband, and like I'm kind of crying, and I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, this is why I'm here. I'm really nervous. I don't know. I have a bad feeling. And of course, my mom, who is an Arab mother, is like, why did you have to go there? Like, why couldn't you just have been a nurse? And why are you worrying me? It's so funny because my dad used to joke, like, I used to say I'm going to be a war correspondent one day, really because he wanted me to be one. And he was like, if you ever, like, get arrested or something bad happens, don't call your mom, call me. Like, I'll take care of it. But I'm telling her all of this, and she starts praying for me on the phone, and she starts texting my family members, like, are texting me while I'm still on the phone with my mom, like, may God be with you, you're meant to be there, you're meant to spread this message. And, like, I'm freaking out. In the middle of me being on the phone with my mom, Caitlin comes into the room, and she's so happy, and she's like, oh my God, 600 people showed up. And I'm like, what the actual fuck? And I'm so nervous. I'm so sorry. I know this is like a really classy place. Don't tell my mom I said that. She would not be happy. But that's what I said in my brain. And I'm really nervous at this point. I'm like, oh my gosh, 600 people, like, what am I going to do? So I, like, kind of take a couple of deep breaths, and I go up on stage, and there are 600 people there. And they're all sitting on the chair, and it's like, no offense to anyone, but it's like a Nickelback concert. Like, shaved white heads, flannel. And people are straight, I'm not joking. This is how they're sitting. Like, this woman is not going to come infiltrate my country today. I'm here to make a stance. And so I'm, like, super nervous at this point. And I go up and I start talking. I crack a couple of jokes, nothing. My palms are sweaty. My knees are weak. My arms are heavy. I got vomit on my sweater already. Mom's spaghetti. No, I'm kidding. I didn't know if you guys, it's a lot of ages in this room. So, okay, but that's what's happening on stage. And so I start telling this story, and it's a really, like, powerful and emotional story for me, but I've told it so many times that I don't really tear up unless I'm PMSing, and which I might be right now too, but it's okay. So if I cried today, don't, like, just be like, oh, she's just a crier. But anyway, so I start telling this story, and I start tearing up, and I, like, wing it as if, like, I'm tearing up because of the story, but it's really because I'm scared, and I feel really lonely. And so I had just come from a self-care retreat where I learned about this activity called If You Really Knew Me. And I decided, for the first time ever, to try out this activity. So I asked everybody to, like, pull out an index card or a piece of paper and write if you really knew me statements anonymously, and then I wanted to share them to everybody. And I brought some of them in my pocket, and I wanted to share them with you because, well, I'll tell you why after I read them. They're just really crumbled right now. Okay. If you really knew me, you would know I'm scared to be who I really am. You would know I was sexually assaulted at 16 and told to shut up about it when I sought help. You would know I collect stuffed animals to feel less alone. You would know I am so lonely and I feel as if I don't belong. You would know I feel broken and that I cannot be fixed. You would understand how lonely I am. You would know that I don't love myself. You would know that I'm broken and I feel like a failure every single day, and I'm scared of never being good enough for anyone or anything. That was what happened. And I felt so guilty and so stunned because everything the people in the audience were feeling was what I was feeling. And they say, like, we speak and we teach the things that we need to learn and we need to know the most. And that day I realized that I had so much more to learn, that I came up on stage and I judged everybody in front of me the same way that I know people judge me every single day, and that I almost missed out on an opportunity to connect with people who were all going through the same thing. And that experience was one that stuck with me, and for some reason, almost every talk after that, I got brought out and I would ask that question, and they would say the same reason of this whole little white supremacy thing, and I'm just like, great, this is now my life purpose. Thank you, God. Like, not something that I meant to that I meant to like stumble into, but I realized that fear really is contagious, and stories are the cure to that common prejudice and understanding. And it's also the reason why I make the documentaries that I make today, because I never knew like that this was what the kind of storytelling I was going to go into, but I realized that there were so many people around us who had stories that we could learn from and understand, but they needed to be heard through their own lens. And that so many times as storytellers, we come in with a like preconceived notion, a perception on a community. We're working on a deadline. So in journalism school, I mean, are there any journalists in the room? Hi! Like I'm a very unconventional journalist, and no offense to that, but like you learn that you go in with a script, right? And then you go and you get a couple of sound bites and bada boom, bada bang, you're done. But there's a reason that the media is so distrusted. And I truly like understand now that it's because so many people go into spaces that have always been misunderstood and still further push the notions of whatever stereotype or stigma there is around a community. And there's a pain tied to that. There's a pain tied to feeling different and misunderstood. And I have felt that pain since I was a kid. I was born in West Virginia, lived in Alabama, grew up in Southern Maryland, and if you struggle with the pain of feeling different in Southern Maryland is a whole other level. I walked into class on my first day of school, and I sat down next to the only other girl who had dark brown hair, and I asked her if she was Muslim too, because I hadn't seen another girl at school with dark brown hair. And she looked at me kind of funny and said, "Am I what?" And from that day on and for the next 10 years, I would never tell anybody about my faith. I would never tell anybody where my family was from. And I kept that aspect of my identity to myself. And I realized that along the years of meeting people who had so many different stories and experiences, that even the people that I had, similar to South Dakota, that I had the most like completely different life and experience with, that there was always a root of commonality. And if you choose to, there's always more in common with people than differences, if you choose to see it that way. So when I first got my first local TV reporting job, I thought that I had won the gold medal at the Olympics or something. It had never been done before. It was something that I thought and I knew was going to be so hard for me. I homeschooled the rest of my high school at 16 and started college early to give myself a head start because I knew that nobody had ever done this job before who looked like me on American television, and that I really wanted to do it. And so I was so determined. So when I finally got that job, I was like, I'm done. I made it. It's not going to be hard anymore. And I realized getting the job actually wasn't the hardest part, because when someone who looks like me, and at the time my videographer, who was a young black woman named Erica who had dreads, we were a dynamic duo. We would call ourselves the best worst team, because every space that we would go into, people would be like, who are you with? I think you're in the wrong place. And we never looked like anybody in the spaces we were in, but two, we never fit in. And I realized that chasing after fire trucks and water main breaks and finding these stories and trying to fit myself into the box that has already been created for me wasn't going to work. And if you are somebody who hires people or works at a company, I ask you to think about this one thing, where I understand the importance now today of making sure that your team is diverse and making sure that you're checking all of your boxes. But if you hire somebody because they are different than you, play onto those differences as strengths, because what makes them different is actually what's going to make them an incredible addition to your company. They're going to bring different experience, different backgrounds, different perceptions, different ideas, And that's what we all want today. That's the space that we have to grow in today if you want to stay relevant, if you want to maintain a legacy, if you want to elevate women and people around you. We have to focus on what we can do better to celebrate those strengths. But for a lot of the jobs that I was hired into, I was expected to fit into a mold that I grew up seeing, that I realized maybe I'm never going to get this job because I don't look like this, I don't talk like this, I don't dress like this. And the moment that I realized that what made me different was my biggest strength was actually a story that Erica and I were on April 2015 after the murder of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. And we were assigned a story, and we went and we covered the story just like every other news outlet who was there. And after we covered the story, we started walking to our car, and there was this like skinny white guy with curly hair and a big smile. He was most definitely a little bit high, but it was great. And he looked at us and was like, "You should walk down a couple of blocks and you'll see one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen." So we walked down a couple of blocks and I saw one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. Now, I don't know if you remember the media coverage in 2015 after the murder of Freddie Gray, but it was beyond disturbing. It was negative. The language that was used to describe people protesting was incredibly just horrific, and it was so representative, whatever, of the people who were coming together as a community. So when we got to that spot, there was music blaring, people wearing I Bleed Orange shirts for Baltimore, hugging and crying and dancing, and there was a Michael Jackson impersonator standing on tops of cars, dancing in ways that I didn't know a body could move, but it was great. And in that moment, like when we were just immersed in the experience and the sound and the smell and everything around us, people were lining up to tell us their stories. And there was not a single other media outlet there. And they would come up and they would say, "Hey, can I share something with you? Can I share an experience with you? Can I share my truth with you?" And they would like hold us and tell us their stories. And I remember Erica and I looking at each other and like thinking the exact same thing and thinking like, this is where we belong. And we got back to our car after the story and we sat and we cried together. And I realized like there was a space for every single one of us to play on every single one of our strengths. And it was what made us different. It was the thing that everybody always put us down for that allowed us access to build trust with the community that had never been heard that way before. It was our faith, our background, our skin color. It was everything that had never been celebrated that gave us one of the most incredible and to me, one of the most powerful stories I could have ever told. And after that, I ended up quitting my job because I realized that this wasn't the space that was going to keep me on my toes and celebrate my strengths. And that I really needed to embrace what was making me different, what society deemed as my weakness. Because I think there's a lie that we tell ourselves. And that lie is that if we're different or something that society has deemed as a weakness, like we will not get the job that we want. We will not get the scholarship that we want. We won't get the relationship that we want, the friendship that we want, the social circles that we want to be in. And to me, the most freeing thing when I was able to embrace wholeheartedly who I was and realized that the people I want to be around were the people who wanted to be around me as me, 110%. The spaces that I wanted to work in were the spaces that came in and said, dress however you want, speak however you want, you have a voice and you have stories that need to be told. The friends in the relationships that I entered into were the ones that took me for as broken and as insecure as I was and made me see my own light. And that was true freedom. And that was truly what elevated me and made me realize that the shackles that I had put on my own self were the ones that were going to keep me down. And it was up to me to make those fall off and to surround myself in spaces like this one that were going to elevate me and remind me of my greatness. When I was young, I always knew who I wanted to be. I wanted to be Oprah, like everybody else. No, but I really wanted to be Oprah. I started watching her when I was about 7 or 8 years old every single day after school, and I was so enthralled with the way that she got people to open up and be their most vulnerable selves and ask the most curious questions and still be able to connect with them on a level that I could never truly understand. I mean, who didn't watch Oprah? And if you didn't, leave. No one? Okay, I feel like you can't really be a part of AJLI if you didn't watch Oprah. It's probably in the commandments or whatever, those things, like, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, so I was really, as I try to get this water open because, whoa, sorry. Maybe I should be, Guys, earlier I had a Madonna mic on under my scarf when I was doing sound check, but it was going into my mouth and nose, so we stuck with this one. Sorry, I got the water open, 1 second. Okay, so me, 8 years old, wanting to be Oprah. I was sure of that, and the only other thing I was sure about at the time was that I was never in a million years going to wear a headscarf. Like, that was just never going to happen because obviously women in headscarves, like, couldn't be on television. Otherwise, there was, like, as a kid, I couldn't come up with another explanation for the lack of diversity on television. Like, I went through a phase, not joking, hopefully photos never resurface, where I dyed my hair blonde and wore colored contacts because I was like, obviously, right? That's what I'm saying. Did you dye your hair blonde and wear colored contacts, though? Okay, good. You were way more secure than me. Good for you. But anyway, so I just always knew, like, this was something that I was going to do. And one day, my grandmother took me to her mosaic class, and I asked everybody questions. And I asked everybody for their story. I tend to gravitate towards the oldest person in a room all the time because I want to learn as much as I possibly can from people that I'm surrounded with. And so this was like my playground, literally. A bunch of senior citizens doing mosaics. It was like the best time of my life. And at the end of the class, this World War II vet stood up and he said, "Noor, we've been in this class for 3 months and didn't know more than each other's names. And now you got us all sharing our life story." And I stood up, beaming, and I was like, I knew I had Oprah potential. And it was great, and I knew that this is exactly who I wanted to become, but it was a matter of reckoning, like, of how I was going to get there and how I was going to maximize on that. So I told you about first grade, but it doesn't just stop there. So around Christmas time, my mom, being the great guidance counselor she was, would make a board for Eid, which is the Muslim holiday. So it would be like the Christmas board, the Hanukkah board, the Eid board, like a word that people couldn't even pronounce, even though it was 3 letters. And I remember she worked so hard on this board, but I was so mortified that I made her take it down the next day. I was like, I can't have this, like, my friends can't see this. And the only time I would pray as a kid was when I would pray to God that my mom would forget to wear her headscarf one day. And I really believed it. Like, I was like, she can't remember every day. She's not going to look into the mirror every day. And I would, she would fill out these forms that would say, do you speak a second language at home? Although we spoke English primarily, so now I, don't know why she even put that. But she wrote Arabic, and I would hold on to my forms, and I would wait until everybody put theirs on the pile, and then I put mine at the bottom of the pile so that no one would see that I spoke a second language. Biggest regret of my life, by the way, because I could totally speak better Arabic today had I not thrown a fit every time my parents tried to teach me. But anyway, so I was always jealous of my friends. I mean, they also had parents whose names were like Julie and Sherry and Bob, and mine was like Dr. Yahya Tagouri and Mrs. Salwa Amesh, and I was like, oh my gosh, kill me. It was so embarrassing. Sorry, I love them so much. They're such great parents. But I mean, I just never understood, the confidence that they had. I mean, my parents were very active in the community. My mom grew up in the States, and so she was like really confident in the way that she would dress and talk and walk and what she would do. And I remember like thinking to myself, how is it that she channels this strength that she has? She didn't put on the hijab until 23 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. No joke. And yeah, but like that's still hard for a hijabi. And so I was like, I just don't understand, like, I don't know what's going on. And when my sister turned 12, we had moved out of La Plata. We lived right outside of DC. And when my sister turned 12, she decided to put on the hijab herself. My parents were like, are you sure you want to do that? I still hadn't done it. So of course in my head, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You're going to make me look like the bad kid? And like my parents never talked to us about hijab because it has to be a choice. It was just like kind of unsaid, like, oh, look how cute and pious she is. She's so great. And of course me, being the rebel, was just like, had an attitude and eye roll glued to my face. And it wasn't great. But I mean, my parents at the time, like, were also really strict. And I didn't used to always say this, but I say this now, like, they could have worked for Homeland Security. It would have been great. They could have monitored me like crazy. And they would always ask, like, where are you going? How long are you going to be? Will there be boys? And I had to lie all the time. Also, sorry, Mom, but I'm sure she knew I was lying. But that's the thing. And she would say things like, you can lie to me, but just know God is always watching you. And I'd be like, I don't want to, like, I really wanted to be Oprah, but I also, like, really wanted to be great in the eyes of the Almighty. So I was really struggling because I had never really been able to understand, like, that you could be both because it wasn't what I saw. And I remember at a time where I felt like my absolute lowest. And I, like, picked up a scarf and I was like, what is it about this thing that makes you so confident? And I, like, just try to channel my mom's strength. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put this on and pray that it gives me the same strength, or just at least let me see what it's all about. So I put it on, and I remember thinking, like, is it okay for me to put this on right now? Because I'm not the best kid. Like, I'm not out here doing all of God's work, and And I realize now that a lot of times when we choose to try to put ourselves on, we feel like we have to, like, reach some pinnacle of perfection or piety or righteousness or confidence. But the people who really choose to put themselves on are the ones who are broken and insecure and struggling. And that place of darkness is where the brightest light sits. And that is where I was trying to go, even if I didn't see it at the time. So I put it on, and you would think that, like, my family was happy and stuff, but they were like, oh, that's cute. Like, no one thought I was going to keep it on. I don't blame them. I probably even said I wouldn't, but whatever. But I made this commitment to myself to at least try. And the week after, I actually got my first job at a newspaper. And I thought to myself, maybe I can have both. Because people like Oprah, people like Lisa Ling, people like Christiane Amanpour, Soledad O'Brien, all of these women broke down so many doors and barriers for people like us that there could never be enough people clawing at the door and making space for more of us. So why couldn't I be a part of them too? So I did it and made this commitment that I was going to be absolutely the best journalist I could possibly be. And the mentor who took me on said, I'm going to train you to be so good at this that nobody can ever not hire you for your skill set. And so I started obsessively shadowing other journalists. All of, like, I would email like hundreds and hundreds of people, but ended up being able to shadow people like Anderson Cooper, Soledad O'Brien, Christiane Amanpour, Katie Couric, Lisa, people who ended up becoming my mentors essentially. And one of the last people that I shadowed, her name is Jumio Lavanji. She was a local news reporter. And she had taken a photo of me at an anchor desk. And I had posted it that night on my Facebook and captioned it, this is what my dream looks like, and I'm going to make it happen. And I thanked everybody that I grew up who supported me, in elementary school and whatever. It was a private Facebook, so I didn't think anything of it, but I put it out. And then all of a sudden, this photo went absolutely viral. And hundreds of thousands of people around the world started sharing it. And they were like, this needs to happen, why hasn't this happened yet? And I remember shaking and feeling so nervous and being like, what's going on right now? And my family my family at the end of the day, everything that they taught us was rooted in two things: be kind and be good and live in service. And so everything was rooted in service. And not service as in just to donate your time and money, but service as in if you have the opportunity and the privilege to be a giver, then that is where you should aim to always be, and that it is always an honor to be someone who can give. Whether it's your thoughts, your time. Islamically, there's a saying in Islam that says a smile is charity. So if you have nothing to give, even a smile counts as charity. And so I was with my family, and we were looking at the numbers grow. And my parents were like, you can't, this isn't about you. You have to do something great with this, because now you have this message and you're getting this platform, and this needs to be a movement. So my name Noor means light. Tangent, my middle name is Al-Huda, which means guidance. And I used to beg my parents to change my middle name because my friends would say Al-Huda, and it was really Al-Huda. And now I love it because my name means the light of guidance. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Never called my dad Dad. It was always Baba. But anyway. So my parents were like, my sister came up with the hashtag Let Noor Shine to inspire others around the world to let their inner lights shine. And it was a movement that brought together bundles of passions and vulnerable spirits, and we thrived on a global scale. And people were sending us letters and messages talking about how they were changing their majors, how they were quitting their jobs, how they were speaking up, how they were coming out, how they were choosing to embrace themselves and going into the world in a way where if the world didn't welcome them, they would find the place that did, and if they didn't, they would pave that path for themselves. And what I didn't realize was that was exactly what I was doing. I was paving a path that I realized had never been there, that the dirt was still covering, and we're still working on that today. Each and every one of us as women, every single day, are fighting for this. And we realized that paving this path in embracing people in great numbers was something that was going to demand for all of us to be heard and embraced. And thankfully, everybody has mixed feelings about social media, but one of the powers of social media is for somebody like me who was never welcomed in mainstream spaces, I was able to build a global community of people and then go into mainstream spaces and be like, if you don't want to be a part of this and you don't want to be a part of pushing culture forward, then you will be left behind, because there is a demand for this, whether or not you like it. And we need to be cultivating spaces that welcome diversity and true inclusion, which diversity is just, representation on a surface level. Inclusion is a true seat at the table. And if your seat at the table doesn't look like your campaign, doesn't look like your lineup, doesn't look like your billboard or whatever it is, people will see right through it. And we wanted to embrace inclusion through the truest sense of authenticity. And so when I quit my job as a local TV reporter a couple years later, I realized that there were stories that I needed to tell that had never been told before. So the first thing that I did was pick up a broken camera, train my cousin how to film, and I found a story of a case that of an institution that housed people with intellectual disabilities and was one of the top 10 worst cases of medical abuse in the United States' history. The case was still open 40 years later, and I decided to tell this story, not just to tell the story of the abuse, but I found people who had been housed in that institution, the doctors who worked there, the lawyers, the parents, and decided to show this story with an ending of light to serve as a sense of justice for people. And that was the method that I used in every other story that I followed. And it was the way that I was able to build trust with people who hadn't spoken to media before, but also used stories as a way of justice for many people. And I think a lot of us think that when we go into spaces, especially if you're a journalist, that people owe us their stories, that you're giving them airtime. But a lot of times, especially with traumatizing stories, it's important to realize that no one owes you, first of all, no one owes you anything, let alone their own personal truth. And if you do go into a space, especially a space that holds a lot of pain, that there should be a mutual exchange. That I should be able to come and sit with you without a camera at first and talk to you about my experiences and build a trust with you and tell you, I know what it's like to be misrepresented, and I'm not going to do that today, and I'm not going to do that to you, and I will not take your story and run with it. It is an honor and a privilege for you to be sharing your truth with me, and if you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's totally fine, because it's totally up to you. And it wasn't something that I learned in journalism school, because to be honest with you, every single one of my professors was an older white man. And they didn't have the same experience and understanding that I did when it came to misrepresentation and how hard it was to fight for accurate representation in the news. I mean, there were times where in a newsroom, I would hear, when I worked in radio, I would hear anchors reading off a story related to a Muslim, and it would be me, the producer, and the anchor. And it would be completely horrible language that would harm our communities. And I would look at the producer and be like, I'm sitting right here. You couldn't have run that by me first? Like, how, and it's because people don't ask that question. They don't ask the question of, how is the way that I cover this going to impact the person or the story or the community that I'm talking about? And if you keep that in mind, you have a completely different perception. And it's a lot, I mean, I think it's easier for women to keep that in mind too, because we recognize how important it is to use specific words and how every word holds weight, and that if you're reckless with the way that you speak or the way that you report because you think it's going to get you more clicks or listens, you are putting people in danger. And I've gone through this myself. And it was the reason why I would go into stories and I would make it a priority, something that I never thought about when I was a kid, to find those people who were misrepresented and tell their stories as a form of justice. And here are some people that maybe you would overlook. This is Brian Slaughter. He is the one, he was the main character in my documentary that talked about people who were housed in the institution. He was abused in this institution for over 30 years, but is now an art and music teacher and was a Grammy-nominated artist. This is Yassine. He is a Syrian refugee who lives in Knoxville, Tennessee, and went through a lot of hardship getting here and staying here, but uses his home country's food as a way to build community. And I'm not joking, the day that I spent with him, there was never not a line outside of his spot. Patrice Banks, who was an engineer, who wanted to become a mechanic, a car mechanic, but could never, ever, ever get hired at any car shop because she was a woman. And when she did get hired at one spot, she had to get fired because the man's wife said that she wouldn't be allowed to work there. So she started the Girls Auto Clinic, which her whole team is women. They fix cars, and there's a nail salon and a hair salon attached to it. So, like, who wouldn't want to invest in that? This is Dan. He removes racist and gang-related tattoos in Baltimore. He was one of the people who I had a similar South Dakota instance with. I didn't get a chance to see him in person before I told the story, but I was really nervous going there because I wanted to make sure that he knew what I looked like before I got there, because I didn't want to make him uncomfortable, which is a thing that a lot of women do. Like, we try to make people feel comfortable while making ourselves uncomfortable. And I realized, like, I need to be able to, like, stand my ground and also maintain my own comfort and be able to connect with people without sacrificing on my own. One of the most incredible people and one of the most beautiful stories that I've been able to tell. This is he is an artist. I don't know if any of you have gone to like New York or LA or Boston and seen Protect Your Heart on the floor, on the ground. It's street art. He's an anonymous artist, never gave his story to anyone before. I spent 3 hours on the phone with him, and at the end of it, he said, "I'd like to give you my story," and then decided to share, and we went out in the middle of the night while he was doing his art. Ooh, this is Leah Monatis. She is a trans Latina woman who engaged in survival sex. She was an art teacher and now fights for the decriminalization of sex work for her community. This is Tiara Tay. She currently, I don't know if she still is, but I profiled her for Sold in America. She's 22, and she decided to work at the Bunny Ranch, which is a brothel in Nevada, so that she could build up her savings to be able to pursue other things. Jen Welter, the only ever woman NFL coach, and also a good friend of mine now. And this is, her name's Terry Colgren. Ha! I'm really good with this. So she is a witch in Salem. I've always had a fascination with witches, but let me tell you this. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys a great story, because that's what my job is. So I went and told this story. She was really skeptical, and it ended up being wonderful. Put it out, and then I got this email, and it was like, "Hey, Noor, I just wanted to say thank you so much for covering our fellow patrons in such an objective and fair light. You know, people never tend to do that. If you ever want access to the vampire community, you have it." I have yet to do the vampire story. I wasn't able to convince my team, but I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me? Who gets access to a vampire community?" But it's on my list. This is Christy Love. She is a survivor of trafficking. She has one of the most incredible, gutting stories, but has a safe house in Kentucky to help women get out of the sex trade. Ooh, just kidding. Just going to keep it on that for a second. I really believe that the shortest distance between two people is a story. And when you engage in that conversation, not only does it give you purpose in being able to listen and hear and experience with somebody else, but it gives the other person purpose. And I really think that the most powerful engagements and conversations are the ones where you both leave feeling like you really learned something about the person and about yourself. And so that's like the low-key, selfish reason I really love doing this, is because I always end up learning about myself through other people. And that is the bridge. That's that whole bridge of commonality that we keep talking about. It's being able to connect your human experience with another human experience, because at the end of the day, everybody has that at least one commonality, even if it's taking in a deep breath, inhaling, and realizing we are all sharing this air together. Even if it's just embracing, we are all living this life together. I'm now going to ask if you could kindly take the piece of paper in front of you and write your own "if you really knew me" statements. And not your name, just the statement. I pinky swear it'll remain anonymous. So I talk a lot, and I'm so running over time, so I'm really sorry. Kind of. I'm not sorry. But I'm saying that so that they don't think I'm not. they couldn't hear me, right? So anyway, while you guys are writing all this, I just wanted to share something. As you're writing down your truth, I'd like to just remind everyone that I really believe that our success comes because of our differences and not in spite of them. And understanding other people's truths on a deep and personal level is what I believe takes ordinary people and makes them high wattage influencers. And not the kind that you see on Instagram, but like if that's your jam, good, use that platform. But people of influence who actually make an impact and a difference every single day, even if it's for themselves and with one other person. And I think a great way to start this is start kind of this journey and like recentering yourself is by telling the story of somebody that you know. Somebody around you, somebody that came, like whether it's your parents or your grandparents or a loved one or a mentor or whoever it is. And it wasn't until I started like writing this whole speech all over again that I realized I needed to interview my own family on a deeper level. And so I interviewed my mom. She's really beautiful. She's like amazing. And I wanted to share a little bit of that interview with you. Why did you put it on?
To have a better relationship with God and to just be more spiritual.
But did you ever think about the fact that you were putting it on in a place where no one else had it on?
I always was probably paranoid, thinking that people were looking at me when I first put it on.
Do you remember the first time you put it on?
Yep, because it was very difficult. We were actually going to a New Year's party, and that was my first outing. And I was like, I need to take this off. I can't go to the party like this. So I kind of had it on, but it was like kind of half off because I wanted them to think that I was cold and not changing my life, basically, yeah.
So you know that growing up, I was always embarrassed of the fact that you wore that. How did that make you feel?
Well, first of all, I'm finding that out now. Throughout your, me hearing you talk and stuff. I mean, I kind of had an idea maybe, but I didn't know to the extent that you were thinking, oh God, I wish she would show up, to school without it or whatever. That's fine. You were a child. I understand where you were coming from. I totally get it. I think it's something very natural for you to feel like that, especially being in a county, in a school where nobody else looked like that.
And when I did end up putting it on, how did that make you feel?
Honestly, I mean, I was happy you were finding yourself. Either way, it would have been fine with me. Truly, I didn't think you would keep it on.
Yeah, I don't think anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I that's why for me it didn't really make a difference. I was like, I hope she's finding herself. I hope she's, trying to get to where she wants to be. But in the long run, I thought you wouldn't be able to handle it and take it off. Sorry. So I do believe in you in a lot of other ways, but that particular thing, I thought that
Thanks, Mom.
It would be too hard for you.
What would you tell people today who are questioning putting on their own identity?
Oh, just do it. The thing is, everybody in this world has their insecurities and their problems. Why should I give up who I want to be or my relationship to God for people that they too have their problems and they too have their issues? And, everybody should do what they feel comfortable with and what they believe in.
So I'm obviously not embarrassed of my mom anymore. But it was really powerful for me to hear that, not only because I learned more about her story, but also like the reassurance that I was okay, that even if I was like, I didn't feel as great of a kid, that it was okay that I was going through this process because it's natural and that's what we do. And we should want to be able to grow and change and become our most authentic selves. The second story I think it's really important to tell is the story of your future. And this is kind of an ongoing and never-ending journey. But one experience that I had was I used to always tell people that I was a broadcast journalism major, even though I wasn't yet. And it was this whole power of visualization thing I was on, The Secret or whatever. And so I had just turned 18, and it was time for me to get an internship that I I was old enough to apply for. So I had been performing spoken word poetry, which was something that I was really into, but really embarrassed that I was into. And then when I started college, I made a promise to myself that I would do anything and everything that I was interested in. So I started performing poetry. And 3 days after I turned 18, it was World AIDS Day, and I had a performance to do. And the night before the performance, I was online searching for internships in newspapers, radios, television stations. I was even looking for a part-time flight attendant job because I loved traveling, and look where that got me. But it's great. 200 flights a year, piece of cake. Just kidding. And so I prayed this prayer the night before my performance. It's called istikhara. It's the guidance prayer. And I basically was like, hey, God, I really need an internship. Can you help me out? Okay, thanks. Love you. Bye. And I went to bed, and I woke up, and I went on stage to perform this poem. But before I did, I introduced myself as a broadcast journalism major. And afterwards, this woman came up on stage, and she took the mic out of my hand. And in front of 300 people, she said, Noor, you're a broadcast journalism major? And I was like, shit, she knows I'm lying. Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. But in my opinion, I technically am, but I wasn't. And I looked just really embarrassed, and I was hesitating. And I was like, yeah. And no joke, in front of 300 people, she said, well, my name is Justine Love, and I'm the Director of Community and Public Affairs at CBS Radio, and I would love for you to intern for us. Just like that. And I was like, thanks, God. But I was also like bawling my eyes out, obviously. Oh my gosh, that's so many. It's great. I wish I could read all of these out loud. So anyway, I realized that people will think of you what you tell them to think. And then they'll give you a job for it. And I think that a lot of times people will hesitate and be like, well, what if I don't know what my purpose is or my legacy is or who I want to be or what I want to leave on this earth? And I really think that a lot of us do know. We've known for a very long time, and when you're young, like, you know what you love. And I always define finding purpose and passion and your personal legacy as combining your skill sets and your talents with the things that pain you the most. So for me, the things that pained me the most were violence against women and the misrepresentation of marginalized communities. And I combined that with my skill set of storytelling and was able to pursue everything that I knew I wanted to pursue, like Sold in America or Woman's Job or all of these documentaries. But I realized that the last story that I needed to tell was my own hero story and what I had gone through using that experience as what was going to propel me in doing my best work. So I went through my first instance of sexual violence when I was 12 years old. And I, at the time, didn't realize what that was going to lead me to. But when I had first heard about trafficking on Oprah, obviously, I realized that I could not physically comprehend what people who were trafficked were going through, knowing the trauma that I felt from my experience that was on no compared scale. And so I made a commitment to myself to tell those stories and to be in those spaces and to use my victim experience as my hero story and to elevate other voices of survivors to places that needed to be heard so that people could actually do something about it. And really turning your mess into your success. And from there, not only was I able to do the documentary, but I got to collaborate on a clothing line where the profits went to combating trafficking and youth homelessness, and I ended up marrying the founder of the brand. So, like, technically my experience got me married. Like, it's a really dark joke, but I can make it because it's my truth, okay? So it's what led me to doing this. It's what led me to doing Sold in America. And I realized that I could always find a way to live in purpose because I had been able to constantly sit in my own truth as if it had already happened and to continue to happen. And even if you aren't doing that for yourself now, I think it's really important for us to attach ourselves and to find other people who are working on it and support them. As women, we experience a lot of horizontal hostility, which essentially is groups of people who have similar goals and values being the ones that have the most estrangement between them and hostility between them, because you put on your own standards and expect people to be just like you. And when we find people have different ways of life, thinking, dressing, whatever it is, you end up being more hostile towards them. And right now we live in a time where the internet exists, and so everyone is dealing with negativity on there. So I think it becomes our responsibility to elevate people and either build your own dream or be a part of supporting other people who are doing it and live in that purpose. So there's a lot of cards here, and I'm going to get kicked off the stage in like a couple of seconds, but I'm going to read a couple of them, and then I swear maybe I'll finish. Okay. So I wanted to read, and I'm going to convince myself that because these are the ones that I picked, these are the ones that everybody in the room needed to hear the most. Because in an ideal world, I would read every single one of them, and we would all sit and cry together. It would be really beautiful. Okay. If you really knew me, you would know that childhood bullying made me insecure and had a lifelong effect. You would know how bad I really wish I could go back and speak to the 26-year-old me. I always say, like, my thing when I have younger siblings is if you are the person that you wish you would have had at 26 or for me at 12, I think that's part of living in your purpose. If you really knew me, you would know I'm constantly fighting to be comfortable in my own skin. You would know that I hate injustice, and my number one goal is to get to heaven. Me too. You would know that I suffer from severe postpartum depression 7 years ago, and I have never been the same since. You would know that I downplay my strengths for the comfort of others who do not look like me. Hello. Maybe I should have stuck with the Madonna mic. If you really knew me, you would know that in taking care of others, I lost myself. I always believe that being in service of yourself first is the most important thing. You would know I overcome crippling anxiety and depression, and people think I'm always truly happy. Thank God for Lexapro medication is not shameful. True that. If you really knew me, you would know I have always believed that I was put on this world to make a big difference and impact, but I've been searching my whole life for my mission. You would know I fit lots of boxes and still no box. I'm a soldier, woman, Black, an immigrant, mother, wife, friend, and yet often I feel alone in my experiences. You would know that I'm scared of not being perfect in the world's eyes. If you really knew me, you would know I need someone to take care of me instead of taking care of everyone else. You would know sometimes I feel out of place and struggle with who I am and how I fit into my community and sometimes relationship with husband and close friends. You would know I hide my anxiety and depression every day. You'd know I feel deep shame about being sexual and won't let myself enjoy it. If you really knew me, you would know that I worry about my marriage. I'd like to ask you to stand up if you related to one that wasn't your own. And now I'd like you to, with everyone's consent, hug the person next to you really tight. Okay, I'm gonna be completely honest. I've never asked people to do that, and the reason is because, like, I don't think I've ever done that activity with a room filled with only women, so I feel like I could have done that, and I still threw in the consent part, because some people don't like to be hugged. Hey, I really love it. I'm like the biggest hugger. What I learned from working in South Dakota is that so many of us feel alone and powerless and feel like our life doesn't make a difference or mean anything. I'm here to tell you that not only does every single person in this room matter, but we all have tools to make a difference in the world. And one of the tools is this, not the Prada phone case, but the phone itself. We have the opportunity and the privilege to be able to broadcast who we want to be, our dreams, the things we're working on, the goals we're trying to achieve, and to be able to rally people around us to build that sense of community. I mean, being in this room right now is a community of its own, and that is such a privilege, and that is not something that we can take for granted. It really isn't. Because at the end of the day, so many of us are feeling different types of pain, but the woman sitting next to you right now is feeling something similar too, and that's why we are all here. We're here to build on that. And whatever you put out into the world, reflect on your intention. Why are you doing this? What kind of human or person of influence or leader do you really want to be? Embrace your differences, and you will find where you fit in. You will be celebrated, and then broadcast your vision, your goals, your dreams, and what you want to do. Push past your own judgment, insecurities, and fears, not only to feel less alone, but to connect with others and realize your place in the world's healing. And we have so much healing to do. There is so much potential and opportunity around you, and sometimes, just sometimes, the best way to start is by asking someone to tell you a story. Thank you so much for letting me be here today. Thank you. Am I on time? Guys, I stayed within the time limit. Oh my gosh. That's like a really big deal for me. Clearly.
Noor, thank you so much. You have taught us that the shortest distance between two people is a story, and we thank you for telling us your story. Thank you for being the light of guidance for us as we strive to create spaces that embrace inclusion. Thank you for your energy, your passion, your wisdom, your intelligence, and your maturity. She hasn't told you that she's only 25 years old, and you are an inspiration to us all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'd like to give you this token of our appreciation.
Oh my gosh, this is so pretty! I need this because I'm leaving tonight and I have to get this on
and
the
there's
plane.
a scarf in there. I know you have a scarf collection. So.
Do I have a scarf? Do I look like the type of person? Thank you so much. I'm so honored.
Thank you very much.
So great.
Little business, sorry. Before we leave, I just have one announcement. The transportation to the opening reception will be available, leaving the hotel at 6:45 with continuous service to and from the History, Colorado. If you prefer to walk, it's an easy 1 mile. We'll see you at the opening reception. Thank you.